What's happening, Bills Mafia? Ryan Thomas back again for this time a live episode of the Thomas Take podcast. This time I am joined once again. It's been a long time. Former guest on the show, circling the wagons. He's circling back on the Thomas Take Sports podcast. ZBot, Zach, thank you for joining me, buddy.
Pleasure
this
is
is
all
awesome.
mine, Ryan. Like you said, been way too long. So it's great to be back on, like we were just talking about, especially right now when there's that bridge between no football and no sports really at all right now outside of baseball. It's always good to continue to distract myself with more Bills content until kickoff gets here. So the pleasure is mine.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for hopping on. And I have to say, I am really diving in too far into baseball just to keep me company.
Yeah.
Just to warm me up for what's to come this July. Obviously, I got that date circled on my calendar, the first Buffalo Bills training camp practice at St. John Fisher. What this is the off-season primer time, which is what the name of the show is, the off-season primer, where I get guests week in, week out. I've had a few guests on the show, and to get you on, I really appreciate it. We got a lot to discuss. First and foremost, your social media game is always on point. Got to give credit where credit is due. I want to ask you first and foremost, as tough as a pill, as bitter a pill as this was to swallow. I have to get your take on just reliving the 13 seconds. Why, God, why? I want to start the show off with that. Your guess is as good as mine, but we haven't talked in a long time, and obviously the 13 seconds was just such a deflating moment for Buffalo Bills fans, and was a moment in Bills fandom that back to how did this happen? How did this all fall apart that quickly? How did we lose that game? Take me through just your watching experience of the Buffalo Bills, Kansas City Chiefs divisional round game, and what your takeaway is, months and months after the fact of 13 seconds as we're heading into this season.
Well, it's funny that you're bringing it up this far down the line, and you say, why are you doing it? But at the same time, I feel like for me personally, anytime that I'm talking to a fellow Bills fan who I haven't spoken with in a while, at least in person, and we get to go on football, it inevitably comes up, because if you haven't talked in a while, it's the one thing that I think, it's obviously our most lingering memory from the season. It's the last time we saw the Bills on the field, right? And so when you see somebody that you haven't spoken to in a while and you're catching up about the Bills in the coming season, it inevitably comes up. And it is interesting to kind of get a vibe from every person you talk to as to how devastating it was for them personally, because everybody was devastated. I guess it's just a matter of what kind of devastation did you go through during the time. For me, I mean, my God, Ryan, I in one of those moments, it just feels like I could get hit by a bus and be put into a medically induced coma the rest of my life. And when I wake up, if I had 5 memories remaining from the prior to the coma, that would be one of them. I mean, it's just one of those moments that I will never forget. And it's obviously a moment I would love to forget, but that's how prominent, of a memory it's going to have on me forever. I mean, past my time, but the wide right, of course, or the Music City Miracle, there's a laundry list, of course, for Bills fans, unfortunately, of these moments. But those moments I just wasn't alive for. I was too young to really be impacted by. This is that moment, right? I mean, this is that singular moment in my lifetime as a Bills fan where, like the wide right and the Music City Miracle, it's just such a lasting, impactful moment that you'll talk about it forever. That's our generation's moment, I think. So whether we're talking about it right now like we are, or we're talking about it 30 years from now, I'm going to feel the same way. That's the crazy part about it. I mean, granted, it feels like forever ago now, but it was less than a year ago, obviously. But the way I think about it right now, I just know is the way I'll think about it forever. In that moment, the roller coaster of emotion was so erratic. It was almost like you could never replicate it any way else. I mean, how else? In what? And I guess that's the beauty and the curse of being a sports fan. You experience these whirlwinds of emotions that you would not experience in any other setting. And in that particular game, I was 100% convinced the Bills were not only going to win that game, but they were going to go to the Super Bowl because the way things were being mapped out, it just seemed like it was destiny at that point. They were going to host Cincinnati at home. There was no way in my mind that I could envision the Bills losing that game. You just come off the perfect game against New England. And when I say perfect, I mean, talk about another moment that we'll never forget. Unfortunately, I think it gets a bit overshadowed now because of this. But that game, it will go down in history as one of the greatest games we will ever see, no matter what winds up happening in the future. So the way things were being played out, I was just convinced in that moment, this is happening. Everything I've ever wanted in my life as a fan is coming to fruition. So I started to cry personally, tears of joy. And this just goes to show you the roller coaster of emotion. Because I mean, in that game, the back and forth, I was not only an anxious mess, but I was also just overwhelmed with raw emotion due to the fact that I was convinced it was all happening. And then within those 13 seconds, the peak of excitement, the peak of, happiness, that emotion is immediately eradicated, and it goes to the basement, the bottom floor of anything you could possibly feel as a diehard sports fan, all within a measly 13 seconds. So there's no words that you can really say. I mean, if you know it, that's the thing. Like, you can try and describe it, but any diehard Bills fan knows there's no explanation needed. They know exactly what that feeling is. They know how hard it is to describe in words because there really isn't a way to explain it other than, I don't think I spoke for days afterwards. It felt like you were coming off of a sickness almost like the flu, where you're just bogged down. I mean, not only emotionally, but physically just drained. So, man, like I said, I'll never get over it. However, as the time went on, the one thing that I think has helped me heal the wounds left from that game was I finally mustered up the courage to go back and rewatch the highlights. I don't think I'll ever have the courage to go back and rewatch the whole game. Maybe I will someday. I don't know why I would do that to myself, but I had to go and reflect on what Josh Allen did that game. The unfortunate reality was not only did the Bills lose that game, but they lost it in a game where I don't think Josh Allen or any quarterback on the planet could have played better. I mean, that was one of the greatest games ever by both quarterbacks. And of course, the Bills wind up losing on the coin toss. But when I went back and rewatched that game, Ryan, and those highlights from Josh Allen, I think the silver lining finally showed to me. And it was, listen, this game literally came down to a lottery ticket where each team had a 50-50 chance and the Bills wound up losing on it. But my God, man, I mean, watching what Josh Allen put together in that game, it at least told me, ZBot, you're never going to get over it. But what you saw in that game would never have been delivered by any other Bills team to ever grace the field during your lifetime. And that game without Josh Allen would never even have been able to come down to it being decided in 13 seconds. That guy is the guy. Didn't go our way this time, but you reflect again, the same thing happened to Patrick Mahomes in the same setting against New England earlier in his career as well. This stuff happens even to the best. So in hindsight right now, right, it's still as devastating as it'll ever be. But after I took the time to go back and really reflect on the game Josh Allen had, it made me feel a bit better knowing I don't know if there's anything else that could have been done, at least on the offensive side. I'll let you get into your piece because I want to hear about how you felt. But the defensive side of things is what really, for me, it's the aspect of the game that I'll just never understand. I'll never get over, and no explanation will ever make me feel better about it.
I love how you kind of provided a look at just the reality of it. The reality of it is, no matter how you look at this game, 13 seconds, quote unquote 13 seconds, no matter how you look at it, it will always hurt. There will never be a moment where it won't hurt. But just going back to where I was, how I watched it, how I digested it, my emotions in the game, it's the equivalent of, honestly, and it's pretty it's a pretty tongue-in-cheek statement, but it felt like a roller coaster ride.
Yeah.
It felt like I was at Darien Lake. I was on the Viper. I was on the Predator. I was on the Mind Eraser. I got off and I felt okay for a little while, and then all of a sudden it just hit me like a ton of bricks. I'm keeled over. I'm obviously vomiting in a garbage can. That was like the proverbial way I felt after watching that game.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, going back and as you did, I watched it over again. I watched the highlights again, and if there was a silver lining, it's that was the equivalent of an Ali Frazier Thrilla in Manila. I'm a big combat sports guy, but it was the equivalent of an Ali Frazier Thrilla in Manila combat, heavyweight title fight, where there wasn't much margin for error for either guy. Both are the two best in the league. I think that was proven in this game as well. It really wasn't a matter of who was better that day. They were both very, very good. It just came down to who had the ball last off of that coin toss. And you look at how this can motivate the Bills, because obviously you don't want to dwell in the loss. It appears to me, and we're getting to kind of a segue here, but it appears to me as if Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott dusted their boots off and said, look, we got to make this team better. Okay, we were really good last year, but we didn't do X, Y, and Z to be just as good. There's still more room for improvement. Every year there's more room for improvement. They've added a lot of really solid players, in my opinion, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But just what I think about that 13 seconds and how I felt sick to my stomach the moment in which Gabriel Davis catches a touchdown pass on 4th down and long. I'm thinking there's no way the Bills losing this game. They lose in the 13 seconds, and obviously I'm pointing the finger as we all did after this game was over. Who is at fault? Who is at fault?
Right.
The Buffalo Bills defense allowing 47 yards in 13 seconds to take place was just crazy. So I think it definitely was one of the worst losses that I could ever remember in our generation of watching Bills football, and we've seen quite a few. Yeah. But that was, I think, the closest we have come to going back to the Super Bowl, and hopefully this year we one-up that and we don't put ourselves in a position to lose a game in 13 seconds. So I just had to get your take on that because it's been a while since we've talked, and obviously that is the last memory that we have of the Buffalo Bills playing football. So for all that's transpired this offseason, all positive things, new additions like Von Miller and Kyer Elam and James Cook, going from the negative side of things and looking at the past, we talk about the present and the future. This goes to the sunnier side of things, to the question of not only where were you and how did you feel about the 13 seconds, but where were you and how did you feel about Von Miller being signed by the Buffalo Bills? Obviously, I want to get your take on that first and foremost. I think it's the biggest addition that any team quite possibly could have had all offseason long. I want your take on the whole Von Miller signing as well as some of the other new additions as we go through the show here.
I love that question on Von Miller because it's hilarious where I was in the setting I was in. So my girlfriend, we've been dating for almost 7 years, but the problem is she and I met in college. She lives downstate near New York City. I'm still up here in Rochester, and we're moving in together soon here. But unfortunately, the duration of our relationship outside of college has been spent at a distance. So when we are together, we try to maximize on that time. Now, of course, she is up during the Von Miller signing, and she has to leave the next day. And we had plans that weren't necessarily just us two all week that she was up. And that night was our date night, right? And that means a lot to my girlfriend, Caroline, because like I mentioned, it's few and far between that we get those opportunities, especially right now because she's finishing up her master's degree. So these opportunities are seldom. We are literally on the way to the restaurant for our date night. And we pull into the parking lot when the Shefty tweet goes live that the Bills had just acquired Von Miller. Now, it's tough to remember, but up until that point, the Bills seemed like they were sitting on their hands. And that's crazy to think because the offseason went from 0 to 100 really quick, because in the same moment they got Von Miller, they also got OJ Howard, and then they were off to the races the rest of the offseason. Plus, I thought they had a killer draft. But up until that point, it was kind of like, are the Bills going to do anything here before they wound up doing everything? So not only was it a massive signing because it's a future Super Bowl, or excuse me, a future Hall of Famer in Von Miller to come and fill probably the biggest void on this team, but it was also really the first signing for the Bills all offseason. It just happened to be the biggest one. So I am at a crossroads here because I need to dive into this to the fullest extent, but it's date night. So I literally look at her in the face. I go, Caroline, I'm going to need you to just give me, when we get to the table in there, just give me 10 minutes to just rip Twitter and just get every ounce of detail I can get from this signing, because I don't think, because she's not a big sports person at all, so she doesn't understand the gravity of this, right? And I'm like, you got to understand, this is probably one of, if not the biggest signing the Bills have had in my lifetime. The only other one that I can remember, there's two really that I can remember where I was, and it was Terrell Owens and LaShawn McCoy. This one is, I think, even bigger because it felt like it was not only the piece the Bills needed, but it told me, all right, Brandon Beane, like you had mentioned, looking towards the sunny side of things, going and trying to get over that next hump. This felt to me that Brandon Beane is acknowledging that himself, the man who holds the keys to do so. And he turned the ignition on and revved the engine as loud as it could go right there. So I'm telling her, I'm like, you don't understand. I mean, this is huge. So that was like the moment. I'll never forget that, because it was like, it had to have been in that hour block of all time, of all the time it could have possibly have been. But Ryan, I mean, how could you not have been just absolutely through the moon stoked? I mean, you just saw what we talked about. The Bills come off of the year they had last year, more importantly, the playoff run that they were putting together and the performances that they were putting on the field. And then you couple that with Von Miller, which, I mean, unless you were living under a rock or just falling asleep throughout half the game every week, you knew as a diehard Bills fan, the one thing that this team has just not been able to perfect is a solid quarterback edge rush. They have just not been able to get the pressure dialed in that other teams have seemed to have been able to do. Most importantly, the one example that always comes to my mind is what Tampa Bay was able to do to Kansas City in the Super Bowl, just 2 weeks removed from what the Bills weren't able to do against the same Chiefs in the AFC Championship. They couldn't touch Mahomes. They wound up getting destroyed in that game. Vice versa, same thing happened to the Chiefs. I mean, the edge rush that Tampa delivered in that Super Bowl was ultimately the game. It's why Kansas City couldn't score. And so you look at the Bills, and it just seems like every element of that team is ready to rock at the most elite level, but that area. And then you bring in Von Miller, one of the best to ever do it in that department. I mean, I was through the moon stoked. And it was almost like, it was crazy. It's almost like on Christmas when, I'll give an old school example. Like when I was a kid, really wanted, a PlayStation 3 at the time, let's say. Not only do you get the PlayStation 3 in Von Miller, but your parents also throw you, I don't know, an extra controller and like 3 or 4 of the games you wanted in OJ Howard. Like, it was overwhelming. You're like, not only did I get the system, the big boy, the one I really wanted, but I got another element to go with it. I was overwhelmed. It was almost in like that moment where you couldn't even focus on the fact that they got OJ Howard because of how big the Von Miller move was. But you know what, Ryan, as the offseason has gone on and we start to see the photos of Von Miller in the Bills uni, we saw the video of him on the phone with his dad, and basically the reason, outside of the bag Brandon Beane's given him, but basically the reason he chose to leave sunny, gorgeous Los Angeles off of a Super Bowl to come to Buffalo in the pursuit of another championship because he feels the Bills are the team to do it with. It was just the biggest affirmation, I guess, to me as to where this team is and where everybody else within the organization views them at. I think that's what I love about this fan base and the organization. Very linear. Everybody always seems to be on the same path. Like I said, if you were to survey anybody, you, me, any diehard Bills fan, what do the Bills need to address? I think every area, Ryan, that they needed to address this offseason, Brandon Beane found a way to do it. And Von Miller, to me, was the biggest exclamation point when it came to any area in particular. So massive, massive signing. And the anticipation for me this season has never been, I'm always through the moon excited about any season. Dude, I don't think it's ever felt quite like this. And Von Miller, to me, is a big part of that.
I was on a show last night, to echo your sentiments. I was on a show last night, and they asked me, what are your thoughts on this upcoming Bills season? How excited are you?
Yeah.
And I feel like it's always been, like these last few seasons especially, I've said each and every season, I've never been more excited for a Buffalo Bills season. And this year, though, is different. This year is even more different than last season and the year prior and the year prior. As you mentioned, we know how an NFL offseason calendar looks. Free agency's first, NFL draft is second, right? So the Bills, literally Brandon Beane is not only a contract wizard, you could say that Brandon Beane is a bold-faced liar in this sense. And it's a funny way I'm pitching this, and hear me out. He's sitting at the press conference as the offseason begins, and they're asking him about the salary cap. They're asking him how active they will be. And Brandon Beane just gives you basically a political answer in the sense that he says, we're not going to be too active as our fans might hope we would be. We're going to just see how the cards fall and make additions here and there. And I actually took him for his word, because when has Brandon Beane ever swayed us? Well, he swayed me. He got me, because they got Von Miller, they got O.J. Howard in the same day, and a lot of people, as you mentioned, are forgetting the fact that they have O.J. Howard on this team because they signed Von Miller in the same day. Like, that signing was so huge. You talk about the pass rushing capital that they've put into that unit with A.J. Epinesa, Gregory Rousseau, Boogie Basham, to name a few, as well as some free agent signings they've had over the last few years. Von Miller, to me, it's almost as if they've made the sundae, they put the whipped cream on it, and Von Miller's just the cherry on top.
Bingo.
He's just that extra little bit that gets you started. You eat the cherry first, you enjoy the cherry first. I know I do. And then you see what happens after that, of course. So to me, I cannot emphasize it enough, the affirmation of getting a player like Von Miller. It's not just any other signing. This is a guy that's been good, it's been great, that is a Hall of Fame caliber player in Denver. The LA Rams made a few picks for him, thinking that he's the missing piece to a Super Bowl run, and he proved them right. He was. So now Buffalo, they make him an offer that he can't refuse, as they believe, too, that he could be that missing piece. And who's to say that they're wrong when all Von Miller has done from day one is be a difference maker? So I know you like to go to the games, as do I, and I think Von Miller is just that type of player that is going to rile up the fan base, that is going to get the fans juiced up. He's a perfect fit for Buffalo, so much so that I remember back in Von Miller's draft class, Newton, Von Miller, and Buffalo ultimately taking Marcel Darius. Von Miller was like the apple of Buffalo's eye. Ultimately, Denver took him one pick prior to us taking Marcel. So it's funny how things come back around, and now he's had this full circle moment now in his career where he is in Buffalo, and he'd always wondered about Buffalo and talking to guys like you mentioned, LaShawn McCoy. Hey, you got traded to Buffalo. Do you like playing there? And Shady had nothing but great things to say. But Shady also a player that got a bag.
Sure.
In a similar fashion to what Von Miller is getting. Obviously, Von's getting more, but you get my point. It's so exciting to see that affirmation that the Bills are legitimized by the players around the league. The players, whether it's the opponent or players that are coming to Buffalo, that, this is a process that is worth trusting, because look at the proof in the pudding. The AFC Championship game, 13 seconds away from going back to another one, and you have the guy that's behind my right shoulder here that I think we'll talk about, of course, to bookend the show, but I think right now you watch that tape against Kansas City and you hope if that Allen is there week in, week out, I mean, they're a freight train. So want to segue from that, though, to talk about the draft, because obviously Von Miller was the biggest free agent signing, I should say, and you had O.J. Howard, you had a couple others, but the NFL draft is really where I believe it's an opportunity for teams to be viable long term. If you hit on the draft, you can make your team great longer because these guys are young, obviously. That's like a common sense thought to it. Going into the draft, what were your thoughts on the ultimate ultimately the player that was selected in the first round by the Bills, Kaiir Elam. And what are your thoughts on the pick overall by the Buffalo first round, Kaiir Elam, 2022 first round pick?
To me, the cornerback position always made the most sense when it came to addressing a position in the first round this coming draft. That was the only real position on the roster that was not only not filled, but when I say not filled, I mean legitimately who is playing the position? Nobody. They let Levi Wallace go to Pittsburgh for next to nothing. And in that moment, it just spoke to me. They're going to have to go corner in the draft here, because up until the draft, they had not addressed that position in free agency. And like we were talking about earlier, just about every other position that needed addressment was taken care of other than corner. But as the draft got closer, there was a lot of talk about going running back in round one. That was really heating up. There was rumors about linebacker. Saw that in several mock drafts. To me, though, cornerback always made the most sense, not only because there wasn't a guy that you trusted currently on the roster to take over at the one spot, but when you also look at the Bills' defense, the thought of having another elite corner to mirror Tre'Davious White with an already elite backfield with Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer, I mean, it's fantasy land in my mind and any Bills fan's mind when you think about the potential of this defense, because not only do you have Von Miller that you're bringing in, you have Tremaine Edmonds with the hopes of him blossoming this season. You have Matt Milano. You have studs already. You have Tre'Davious White, of course, an unquestionable top 10 corner in this league. And then, as I mentioned, two of the best in the backfield in the entire game. The thought of mirroring Tre'Davious White with another elite corner to add to this already explosive defense. I mean, the crazy thing, Ryan, you'd have a tough time arguing with somebody which unit right now is better, the offense or the defense. I think the defense very much so gets overshadowed, and that's completely due to Josh Allen, and that's obvious. We get that, and it's an offensive league, so of course that's where everybody goes. But when you get down to brass tacks here, man, this was still the number one defense in the league last year, and I would be shocked if they weren't right around that again this season. Adding to that defense in the first round of the draft at a position that is continuing to become more and more vital. You look at the quarterback play in the NFL now, especially in the AFC this coming season, you better have a secondary that is ready to play, because if you don't, you're going to see a lot of what Josh Allen did to several defenses throughout the year, because if you don't have guys to contain these elite quarterbacks, you're screwed. And at this moment in time, going into the season, not many squads have a better backfield than what the Bills currently have. So I am stoked about the Kaiir Elam pick. And ultimately going into the draft, Ryan, it's what I wanted to do. It felt like the boring pick, right? But oftentimes the right pick is. It wasn't sexy. The running back position sexy, a wide receiver sexy. But when I'm looking at this team in the window they're in, it really felt like a corner would be a massive acquisition. And I felt like the guy they went with would be an immediate starter, an immediate impact. I feel Kaiir Elam is exactly that. And not only that, Ryan, but what we saw from him in that footage of him meeting with the team, you want to talk about a guy that's not only talented, but that is dialed in. And immediately, it just felt like he fits the mold of this team. Because you know what I'm saying there? There's a mold here.
Oh,
you either
sure.
fit it or you don't. And
right.
You can tell pretty quick. It's kind of like you only get a first impression, right, when you meet someone. And, granted, things can develop. But oftentimes, that's really what you're hanging your hat on when you have an impression on somebody. The first thing I saw out of that guy was him pulling out a playbook out of his backpack when he's meeting with Bean and McDermott. And he's asking for the playbook on the plane ride to Buffalo after he's drafted. Give me that all day. I love the pick.
I couldn't agree more. I absolutely love the pick, and I mocked corners to Buffalo all draft season long. It seemed like, February, March, it was like corner is the pick. It's got to be the pick, whether it's Trent McDuffie, whether it's Kaiir Elam, whether it's any one of them.
And there was plenty of them.
Sense.
That was ultimately the question, right? It's like, what's it going to be at this point?
Which one was it going to be was really the only question for me. And seeing how the draft kind of flowed the way that it did, I feel the Bills actually got the perfect addition to not only this team but this defense. Like schematically, I think Kair Elam is going to fit in like a glove. I think he's an upgrade over Levi Wallace, a name that you mentioned earlier. That fans were upset to see him go. He goes to Pittsburgh for a relatively cheap deal, and he was an undrafted free agent that Sean McDermott actually groomed into the player that he ultimately became here in Buffalo. Sometimes hot, cold, you could say inconsistent, but he was trending upward as he made his exit, and you never like to see that. But business-wise, it's a business.
Sure.
One guy goes, another guy comes in. Kair Elam is that guy, and you talk about the notebook and the video of that. A very reserved, composed, typically Brandon Beane, a very reserved, methodical Sean McDermott. Not hide their faces. They could not hide their change in expression. The moment when Kair Elam opened up that book bag and handed it over, in terms of just how impressed and how shocked they were at his attention to detail. And I think there's moments, as you said in a first impression, that just say, okay, this is the guy. This is the guy that we got to go get. Call it corny, call it whatever you want, but I think that was the moment where Brandon Beane said to himself, that's the guy that he's in play here. This guy is more than just someone we're interested in. This is a guy that really fits the culture, the fabric of what they've built over the course of the last 5 years. You mentioned Twitter, and you're active on Twitter, as am I, and you see all the tweets of people, Bills fans, Bills Mafia all around the country, all around the world, saying that they wanted a running back in the first round. You get the best of both worlds. You get a corner in the first round, and you get a running back in the second round that many people mocked to Buffalo, possibly in the first round. I even saw some mock drafts having James Cook being one of the first running backs taken in this draft. Whether you agree with that, disagree, another topic for another day. But the fact that they crossed off two big boxes in corner and running back, adding competition to the running back room and putting a guy that can mirror Trey White. We don't know what version of Trey White we're going to get coming back from that ACL injury. I only say that because it was a bad injury. In terms of what version we get, we'll see. I think he's going to be fine. I'm not worried about it. But obviously, Levi Wallace gone, Trey White on an ACL injury, coming back from it. You had to add. You mentioned the quarterbacks in the AFC. I mean, the AFC West alone, Derek Carr, Justin Herbert, Pat Mahomes, who's arguably the best in the league, and then you go to every division in the AFC. You could honestly say the worst quarterback in the AFC right now. Maybe Deshaun Watson as far as starting. I don't know.
I mean, it's tough. I will say
tough.
This, though, Ryan. Luckily for us, I think 3 of the worst quarterbacks in the AFC are in our division at this point.
That's true. That's a great point.
It's wild. I mean, it is incredible. The AFC West is my favorite talking point, maybe ever. I am going to, outside of course, the Bills, I am going to soak in every moment I can to watch that division this year, because we are, obviously it's bleed Bills and that's it, right? But at the end of the day, of course, we are tried and true football fans, and we like nothing more, exciting than knowing when the Bills game is over or they're not playing until Monday or whatever, you got other great games to watch. Every single one of those games in that division is must-see television. I mean, we are going into a season here. And what's crazy is the Bills ultimately are one of the biggest driving forces, not only for us fans, as Bills fans, but the NFL in general, towards that excitement. But to add to how you feel and how I felt, where this excitement level is just on another wave compared to anything before. And like you, I'm the same way. Every season to me is the one I'm most excited for, but this is just different. On top of what the Bills already have, we also are being prepped up for some of the best football ever outside of the Bills. So not only do we get to enjoy what the Bills are bringing to the table, but when they're not on TV, we also get a litany of just incredible football, and it's exciting. The AFC West, a really, really major factor for me there. I mean, watching those guys eat each other alive has me stoked. I cannot wait to see who wins that division.
Yeah, it's going to be a fun season, to say the least. It's going to be a fun fantasy football season in terms of some of the new look at the changes in not just quarterbacks but wide receivers.
No, it's nuts.
Tyreek Hill going to Miami, Devontae Adams going to the Raiders. I mean, those have been two of the top 5 fantasy wideouts, NFL wideouts in the league the last 4 or 5 years. So there's just a lot of changes from one season to another. I think this was the busiest offseason in my memory. I've never seen anything like it, and I don't think we will for quite some time. Going from Kyer Elam to James Cook, though, and just your analysis right now of the running back situation in Buffalo. Devin Singletary is a guy that I've always championed and a guy that I've always rooted for, and is a guy that I was really impressed with the last 6 to 8 weeks of the season. He really stepped up his game. Fans were calling for it. He was hearing it. He was seeing it, and he was given more of an opportunity in the offense towards the tail end of the year. He made the most of it. Zach Moss is somebody that is a hot topic right now as far as what Bills fans expect from him, or expect more from him, I should say. What is your thoughts on just the draft selection of James Cook out of Georgia? Obviously, the little brother to Dalvin Cook in Minnesota, a running back that's been one of the top guys for quite some time, and had a great career at Florida State as well. What are your thoughts on James Cook and just the whole running back situation within the Buffalo Bills organization right now?
Well, I'm with you. I am a guy who thinks Devin Singletary. Now, let me preface, I don't think that Devin Singletary is the guy that you look at to be the end-all be-all when it comes to your offense or the running game in general. But when it comes to what the Bills already have, that's not necessary. I don't care who you have in the backfield. And at the end of the day, Devin Singletary's popping off 5 yards a carry on average. I think Devin Singletary gets a bad rep. I also think that the way the offense is set up, especially on the line, it's not built for incredible success at the running back position. At least it wasn't last year. I saw the same thing that you saw as the season went on towards the tail end of the year. And for some reason, I think it was when Ryan Bates hit the line, things started evolving very quickly for Devin Singletary. I actually spoke about this with him because I had noticed this as the season went on. Not only did it look like he was getting better in general, but it also just looked like every element of his game was also progressing. The way he was moving, hitting the holes, his shiftiness, everything kind of seemed to come to a head towards the end of the year. And with that said, I look at Devin Singletary as a guy who I think can still be a major role on this team. Not only that, I think that the draft pick of James Cook benefits Devin Singletary. You look at this league now, it's not just a one running back league. You got to have two guys. You got to have a tandem. There's no more relying on one running back unless you're the Tennessee Titans. It's just not the way it works anymore. I think Devin Singletary ultimately gets better with another better option in the running back room, and that's James Cook. Now, when it came to, the draft pick itself, back to our continuing talking point here of Brandon Beane going through methodically all offseason and addressing different areas that either needed to be completely filled or just revamped. We knew that the running back position was one of those areas. And it really started when the Bills tried to get J.D. McKissic, and we thought he was coming to the team. That ultimately fell through. So we knew right then and there, Brandon Beane was looking to not only upgrade, but just add to the running back room. J.D. McKissic falls through. I think that signing, or what would have been a signing, told us the type of running back Brandon Beane was looking for, and it seemed like it was a running back that was going to be able to be productive in the passing game. And I think that that's one of the major focal points that was touched upon all offseason about James Cook's game, and that what he brings to the passing game is just as effective as what he brings to the running game. I was ultimately stoked about the pick, especially when Breece Hall was already off the board. I know a lot of Bills fans wanted him. I know when it came to the running back situation, I was, looking at him as well. The Jets really, went after him in the second round. They got him early. So he was gone, and you wondered at that moment if the Bills were still going to go running back. But I think them taking James Cook, I don't see Brandon Beane as a guy who settles for a second option. I look at him as a guy where he looks at his overall board, and if the guy that was the guy is gone, they're going to go to the next position that has the guy. So going running back in the second round, going James Cook, listen, I'm at the point now, man, where it's just blind belief and faith in Brandon Beane, and let me know why I shouldn't have it. And, so James Cook, to me, I love it. The more I've watched what he's going to be able to bring to this team, it's got me really, really excited. And like I mentioned, I feel like now last year, a tandem of Devin Singletary and Zach Moss isn't going to cut it. But I think a tandem of Devin Singletary, if what we can get out of him is what we saw towards the end of the year, and then another element in a second-round pick, the highest draft pick we've had in a running back in a very long time, to go alongside with that, just another aspect, Ryan, of this offseason leading into the regular season that's just got you like, man, I cannot wait.
Yeah, I completely agree. When you watch as much college football, SEC, the Georgias and all those colleges that are just powerhouses, and just, by the way, raking in the money in terms of the college programs that are in the nation, in the SEC. But James Cook, when the tape is pulled up of James Cook as the Buffalo Bills select him, my first thought is finally, Bills, I think, added a running back that, don't get me wrong, I love the fact that Josh Allen is an athletic freak. I love the fact that Josh Allen can do these topsy-turvy dips and dives and ducks and dodges like nobody else can, like no quarterback I've ever seen with his size do. But at the same time, I think James Cook is going to dramatically help somewhat take away the athleticism from Josh Allen for the better, in terms of Allen won't need to run around a lot. If James Cook is in the backfield and he's on a pass pattern, not only does that guy get open, but he can catch. For a running back, he's got great hands. I would say that that's probably the best facet of his game, as well as his ability to run between the tackles, as well as his ability to run routes and track the ball in the air. This is a guy that I see as a Swiss Army knife type running back in this offense that the Bills haven't really had, and that the Bills have tried to have over the years, but just haven't been able to add that type of player. Much like you said about Von Miller coming here, the Bills needing that pass rusher, I would say the Bills need for a dual threat running back, one catch passes in the backfield the way that James Cook can, is something that is a welcomed addition. Yeah, we'll still see Josh Allen scramble, but if you can dump the ball off to James Cook for what is normally a 4-yard gain for any running back, and James Cook can turn it into 8, 20, 30, 40, and more. That was his identity as a player. He was a home run threat, out of the backfield, catching balls out of the backfield running back, and it greatly excites me because I think going from Dable to Dorsey, and I just want to touch on this too because this is such a huge topic for the Bills fans. Dable to, it's almost as if, from what I'm hearing, and we won't know until the season starts, but from what I'm hearing from these players is that Ken Dorsey is going to provide a little bit of a sexier flair, shall I say, to this offense than what Brian Dable did. And Brian Dable liked to mix things up. He liked to do the jet sweeps. He liked to do the running back passes and the wide receiver passes and stuff. And he loved to implement any player within the offense at all times. You never knew what direction the Bills were going to attack you at. So I think Ken Dorsey, though, from what I'm hearing, it seems as if he's going to provide a little bit of a different flair, and James Cook is one of those players that makes me think, man, there is more to this offense than what we've seen so far, because with a player like that, he will show that. He will help provide that. So that's my take on the James Cook pick, and moving forward, I think that this offseason, I want to get your take just overall on this offseason. You touched on it, of course, as we have all show long, but could this offseason have been even better than what you anticipated? Did you anticipate them being this active? I didn't, personally. And the fact that they were just goes to show you that they won it.
Here's how I've been defining it, I guess, all offseason. Brandon Beane promised this fan base that he was going to build the franchise through the draft. And that's exactly what he's done. And A+ all around. I mean, the foundation that has been built from the ground up by Brandon Beane is one of the best rebuilds that we have seen in a very long time. I mean, we're talking about from mid to bottom of the pack to top of the pack within a couple of seasons. And some of the gambles that he's taken, no more important than Josh Allen, who, let's not forget, was a massive gamble in the eyes of many when it came to the 2018 draft. Brandon Beane has done an incredible job of getting the team to where it's at through the draft. Once that foundation was in place, Brandon Beane then began to add elements outside of the draft in order to perfect this team and get it from what they would call in the locker room playoff caliber to championship caliber. So they started to do that. And as we saw, the more that they added around Josh Allen outside of the draft, and in particular weapons, right? Every year got better for him as they continue to add around him. When I looked at this particular season, the way I've been defining it is Brandon Beane finally has the foundation completely intact in which he, had said from the beginning. Now that that's there, I've been using the house analogy. You got a beautiful, gorgeous house that you built yourself. And now that everything that you could do in order to get that foundation up is done, you got to add the little elements that really bring it over the top, right? Maybe you want to marble the bathroom floor, right? Maybe you want to get the, I don't know, what the Viking, is that the brand? The Viking stovetop or whatever, just the little things. I looked at this offseason and it told me not only did Brandon Beane stay true to his word, but it showed us another side of Brandon Beane that we have not seen yet. And I think that is all chips in the center of the table, Brandon Beane. I think that's a little bit against the ideology that we've come to know from Brandon Beane, which is fine because, like I keep saying, I got blind faith in the guy and I have no reason not to. But that's been built upon pretty, I don't want to say conservative moves, but nothing's been like what this was, where it's just so clear cut and obvious that he is throwing all of his chips in the center of the table in the pursuit of a championship, because they know in that organization as well as anybody, there's a window here that might not be as wide open as it is right now ever again. And they prominently made sure that there was not going to be any question mark left after this offseason when it came to saying, did we do enough to get this team, at least on paper, to where it needs to be to get over that hump? So to me, in reflection, Brandon Beane really showed how versatile he is as a GM. He went against what I think we have come to know him as, and in doing so, it might have been the best offseason he's ever had at the job. So just goes to show you what we have in this front office. He can do it in a variety of different ways. And it's not only just these acquisitions, it's also the re-signings. Like you said earlier, the ability to stretch a dollar, the reconstructions, keeping Stephon Diggs. I mean, Ryan, so many things happen. You can't even keep it straight in your head. So the ability to do all of that, I don't know, man. I'm at a loss for words. And that just goes to show you what I feel about this offseason. And I can never say enough about my love affair for Brandon Beane and what he has done for us fans here in Buffalo.
I love it. I have conversations with people, just friends, and obviously on this podcast about, Super Bowl or bust. And now, the local media and the national media. They're asking,
they're all over it.
They're asking Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott the exact same thing. Right. Is this a Super Bowl or bust season? And I think it's their job, and their and their attitude to downplay that. And I kind of look at that and say, sure, hey, just the same way that Brandon Beane said, hey, this is not a Super Bowl or bust season, it's the exact same way Brandon Beane said, we're not going to go be spending all this money this offseason. It's the exact same thing. It's what I like to call a sports politically correct answer. And that's okay. We can know that. We can smile at that. We can say, okay, we know what this is. We know that There's no better time than now to put the team together, to get the boys on track, and to go out this season and earn every single thing that we deserve, frankly. Yeah. I feel like these last few years, we've been so close, and the motivation for a guy like Josh Allen, I think if Josh Allen is the personality type that I believe he is, he's going to be coming out here looking to just take souls with passes. I mean, in terms of just said earlier, playing balls to the wall.
Just imagine, and I've even looked at it like this, because you can't expect Josh Allen to do what he did in the playoffs every game. But I also don't think we saw that Josh Allen, and this is also taking into account how good he's been in so many different facets of his game throughout his young career here. But I don't know if we've quite seen that ever before. And like you said, can we get that in the season? The way I look at it, man, even if we get 4 games that are like that in this season, that's still quarter of the year where Josh Allen Paul, unlike anybody has ever seen ever. So you take that into account, and the thing is now, right? There's no more. Oh, where's the ceiling? Because what that was. Listen, I mean, that is anything and everything any fan, organization, top to bottom, would want and ultimately needs nowadays to compete. We've seen the ultimate the ultimate product on the field that Josh Allen can deliver. So pairing that with what I completely agree with you on, the character and the driven mentality that he also brings. Listen, I'm glad we're in the spot we are, Ryan, because if I'm anybody else, man, I'm scared to see the Bills come to town on a Sunday. I am, point blank.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I am so excited for this season. I'm actually super excited for just the process of this season to start.
Sure.
Just training camp. I've actually been never more excited for a preseason than I am this year as well. Yeah. And it's crazy to say that because, years past in Buffalo Bills fandom, going into, back into our early, younger days, we'd watch the preseason and think, oh, can this guy be the number 2 corner? Can this guy be, the number 3 wide receiver? Those are gone. I mean, this team is so stacked that any undrafted free agent, it's like they're auditioning to make another team because the Bills are just so loaded that it's very tough to make that team right now. I mean, they're the most talented team in the league.
Yeah, it's like going out for an acting gig and you see Tom Hanks as the role. It's like, oh, well, he's the lead. It's like, all right, well, I mean, I could audition here, but the odds of me ever getting on screen are not very high. I mean, that's the problem you want to have. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more there. Oh, David coming. I mean, yeah, listen. And that's what I love about this is another aspect of this whole Josh Allen experiment too that I love what David's saying here. Josh Allen is the prototype.
Yeah.
Because not only is he accurate in saying that, because I think that if you had like a Sims type world where you could build the quarterback, it would be Josh Allen. But it's also the other organizations who are just on their knees begging to anyone that'll listen, please allow our guy to turn into that. We're hearing it about Jalen Hurts. We're hearing it about Jordan Love. Any quarterback that has like raw athleticism that hasn't shown any peak potential yet, everybody wants him to be the next Josh Allen. But here is the unfortunate truth to anybody outside of Buffalo. There's only one of them. You're not going to, I mean, this is generational. It's generational, especially the way he did it. Patrick Mahomes came right into the league and it was there, right? Off the bat, right? What Josh Allen did over the progression of a handful of seasons, good luck seeing it again.
There he is. There he is.
In all of his glory. Look at him. That's great. Is it a canvas, by the way? I love that.
That's a canvas. Yeah, that was done. One of my dad's coworkers' sons put that together.
Wow.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
It's awesome. Yeah, it's awesome.
It is Josh Allen. Like that right there. There's no football in hand. I think that was shortly after a touchdown was thrown.
I would imagine.
And yeah, he looks pretty freaking happy. That's the Josh Allen that we've all fallen for. I tell my girlfriend all the time whenever she brings him up, I say, the sweet angel, the sweet angel, Josh Allen. Oh, you gotta go. Like David Reed knows. He kind of show all the time. He knows, when I go back and I've done a lot of shows about the drought years and
right.
Stuff like that. These quarterbacks, like we have waited for a Josh Allen. We waited for a Josh Allen since Jim Kelly.
Oh yeah,
that's a generation plus where we had to wait for a Josh Allen, and we got him. So it's awesome to discuss how much better he could be. And when we talk about teams around the league, you go back to that draft, right?
Yeah.
Where you have Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, Josh Allen, Josh Rosen, Lamar Jackson. Josh Allen's the best quarterback of that class, I think, by far. By far.
Ryan, look at it. Josh Rosen out of the league. there's a potential within the next 2 weeks here. Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield could be fighting for a starting job on the same team, and the Ravens won't commit to Lamar Jackson long term. That right there shows you everything you need to know. Meanwhile, while all that's happening in the background, Josh Allen is the current odds-on MVP favorite, the Super Bowl favorite, and quite literally right now, him, Patrick Mahomes, face of the league. I mean, let's face it. As Brady and Rodgers are taking their talents off the field soon here, you're looking at the new face of the league, and one of them is in Buffalo. And if you thought I'd ever have an opportunity to say that in my lifetime, like you said, not only was it since Jim Kelly, but it was also filled in the middle with a ton of failed experiments, a ton of optimism that never even remotely came close to panning out. Everything about this is extraordinary, and it's why I never get sick and tired of talking about it, ever. Like, I don't care if it's been years since the Bills have drafted him. I don't care about anything that's happened prior. All I care about is the fact that the one thing that I think every Bills fan, like we were just talking about with the other organizations begging and pleading for their guy to turn into it, it happened to us. And we were coming to the point, of course, how could we not, over that long period of time where you're just like, it's never going to happen, right? It's just never going to happen,
right,
until it happened, right? And here we are.
Right.
And it's a hell of a feeling, like you said.
It really is. The rise of Josh Allen is unlike anything I've ever seen, and the player, as it stands, the last time I saw him, in terms of being the prototype, as David Reed mentioned, the last time I saw him out on the field is unlike any quarterback I have ever seen. That night, I've never seen a quarterback do what he did, ever, especially in ultimately a loss. It's just mind-blowing. That was the best game I've ever seen anybody play, and it was a loss. Like, I can't wrap my head around it. But moving forward, I want to ask you just this kind of bonus question before we wrap up here, and I really appreciate you hopping on here, ZBot. It's been an awesome time, Zach. Always welcome on the show. I had a long list of guests on, and then I got into the MMA thing, and then I got into the baseball thing, and now we're wagons back to Buffalo Bills discussion here as we ramp up for training camp. I got to ask you, who would you say is the biggest Buffalo Bills sleeper player in the 2022-2023 season? It's a question I've asked every guest on the show that covers the team. I'd love to get your thoughts.
Wow, I think there's a lot of answers here. There's a couple that I think could fit the mold. I think one is Tremaine Edmonds. I think a big knock on him has been that he hasn't had that front line in front of him in order to allow him to maximize his game. Will that come to fruition this year without any excuses? Because they're gone. That front line is locked and loaded on defense this year. Could Tremaine Edmonds wind up becoming the guy this season that everybody was hoping he would? I think Jamison Crowder is a big sleeper. You want to talk about a guy, I know we were talking about O.J. Howard earlier. You want to talk about a guy that almost no one is even referencing that's on this Bills team right now? It's him. And when you got guys on this offense that need to be accounted for in your game plan, you're oftentimes looking at the roster thinking to yourself, how do we account for this other guy as well? I think Jamison Crowder could be that. But my ultimate sleeper, and the guy that not only do I think is a sleeper, but that I just desperately want to be more incorporated into this offense, and it's Isaiah McKenzie. I think Isaiah McKenzie is one of the most underrated players on the entire team, and I don't think it's very much to his own fault. They don't utilize him properly, and when they do, he always delivers. I tweeted this out yesterday. It's wild, and I'll share it with you right now, Ryan, because to me, it just goes to show you what you can get from him when the opportunities are allotted to him. And it's just very few and far between. His 2021 stat line, 26 targets, 20 receptions, 178 yards, and a touchdown. In week 16 alone against New England, he had 12 targets, 11 catches, 125 yards, and 1 touchdown. So almost half of his entire targets all season came in one game, and he wound up catching 11 of them for $125 and a touchdown. Not only that, but you can also really incorporate him in gadget plays, run plays. He is a Swiss Army knife that I think is underutilized, and I'm begging and like when you were talking about Ken Dorsey bringing a flair, showing different elements, that's one element I hope is really brought to the forefront, and that's getting Isaiah McKenzie more involved. Even if it's just 2 or 3 plays a game, it's more than what they've done with him in the past. And I think that when you do get him involved, he is a real difference maker. So my sleeper is Isaiah McKenzie, not only because I think the potential is there, but more importantly, Ryan, because I personally want it. I just think that's a guy that really can impact this team when given the opportunity.
I have written down on this notepad, wrote it down before the show, the 4 sleepers that I wrote. They all happen to be on offense. I got a lot of love for the defense, but to your point earlier, this was the number 1 ranked defense last season.
Right.
The big piece of it is Von Miller, and the rest of it is the majority of it is still the same outside of Von Miller and Kerry Elam.
Sure.
The starters will be largely the same. I do have Jamison Crowder, O.J. Howard, 2 tight end sets with O.J. Howard and Dawson Knox.
Yes.
It just blows my mind, as well as Isaiah McKenzie. And listen, not only is Isaiah McKenzie all the things that you just mentioned, he's also a really good dude. Like, I just want to throw that out there. He's an awesome guy. I got to meet him twice, and both times he was just awesome. I mean, it was everything that you would actually want out of just meeting a person, whether he's a football player or not. So throwing that out there, I would say that game against New England, Cole Beasley, he's out with, COVID stuff and all that, as that was what it was throughout the entirety of last season.
Right.
A little bit of a distraction, to say the least, but Isaiah McKenzie filled that spot, and I think that was the end of Cole Beasley. I think that moment on, it was like, okay, we have a player here that's younger than Cole Beasley. He's a little bit faster, I'd say, than Cole Beasley, and is somebody that obviously, off of Josh Allen, he's the only receiver left from Josh Allen's rookie season. Isaiah McKenzie's the only receiver left. So it's something that I definitely want to throw out there in terms of just the familiarity that they have with one another. That's a huge advantage for Isaiah McKenzie going into this season that not many people are really discussing. So, the familiarity with Allen in comparison to Jamison Crowder, who is a savvy vet. He's bounced around, Washington. He was with the Jets. He's been in this league and has produced everywhere he's played. But I will say, I think Isaiah McKenzie has a step ahead of him, a little bit of an edge ahead of him against, in terms of a position battle against Jamison Crowder. So
I agree.
I love all the thoughts on this show. I am so pumped up for Bills football season. Zach, I really appreciate you having me on. Folks, you can follow Zach on Twitter at Zach, ZACB22. He's the host of the Smoke Break on the Buffalo Fanatics YouTube channel Mondays at 8 p.m. What can we come to expect? Give us a WWE style of your show. Like, what can the folks of Bills Mafia come to expect from the Smoke Break each and every Monday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time?
What I like to do, Ryan, I like to be as authentic as possible. So I'm not a huge stat guy. I'm not a huge analytic guy. I like to bring the voice of the fan to the fans type of experience. I love that. And I think there's, for us as Bills fans, there's no better fan base on earth in any sport. So I like to really get into that element because it's the best fan base and it's also the most passionate. So I really like to bring that aspect each week. As the off season continues to roll on here, we're going to be combining shows over at the Fanatics. So you can expect me, Rev, and Rico to be doing a lot of simulcasts together as the off season continues to go on here, just because you know how it is. As the off season continues to dredge on, it gets a little bit, I guess,
stagnant.
Yeah, stagnant's probably the best way to put it, especially when it comes to just news in general surrounding the NFL. So we're going to be doing a lot of combined stuff because you know how it is. Like us tonight, I always have more fun with somebody than I do solo. So we're going to be doing a lot of that coming up. And like Ryan said, over on the Buffalo Fanatics YouTube channel, you can find all that. So what are we down to now, man? Is it like, are we in the 70s now as far as days left? Is that where we're at?
I believe we're in the 70s.
Let me look it up.
We'll have to look it up. But yeah, I definitely, I've known Rico for quite some time, and I've obviously known you, and got to work with you, and knowing a few of the other guys over there. It's awesome just to have this massive of a podcasting community.
Isn't it nuts?
You can call it, what it is. Like, people on the outside looking in, one network as competition for another. I've never really looked at it that way. I've always looked at it as we all are passionate about Buffalo Bills football. Iron sharpens iron. I want to get as many opinions in my head from other people as humanly possible, to the point where my head might explode, Like that's what I want. That's what that's what I'm all about.
I agree completely.
I'm an interviewer at heart. Like I like to ask questions, get answers, and then it kind of brushes and shines my opinion a little bit because I can, kind of correlate my opinion off of another opinion, and it just creates great for future, shows and talking points. That's what it's all about, man.
You said it perfectly. I mean, I think I don't think it's any fault of our own, but I think we might take for granted what this podcast and content creation community is in Buffalo because we're so entrenched within it. You look around at other fan bases, man, it is not there, not to this extent. So
nope.
I completely agree with you. I look at it the exact same way. I look at everybody within this community as one big family because I think that's what it is. Ultimately, it's just other Bills fans with a microphone in front of them love doing what you're doing. And they also are as passionate about the Bills as you are. How could you not love that? So I am in complete agreement with you there. And I think it is, as time's gone on here, especially as a lot of us consume Bills content this way, it is just awesome. And just another feather in the cap of being a Bills fan that we have all that we have within that community here.
I completely agree. Zach, this was awesome to have you on the show. I'm looking forward to getting you back on prior to the season starting, of course. So keep close to your Twitter, as I know you always do. I'll be DMing you in the near future.
There, Ryan,
and, of course, if you ever need a guest, you know where to find me.
Absolutely. I look forward to doing something like this as well on my end as the season approaches. Because like I said, it's more fun when there's less to talk about, having other guys on like yourself and those within the community just to do stuff like this. Because being selfishly, I guess, Ryan, it almost makes the time go by a little faster for me talking about it, and it gets me more revved up, and I can never get enough of that. And by the way, I looked it up, 71 days. So we're about to be approaching the 60 marks. So we're getting close, folks, and I couldn't be more stoked. I love it.
I'm pretty sure even though the recently retired Rob Gronkowski is out of the game, he will probably post something when it's the 69th day until
I would imagine.
NFL football season.
Imagine. And I hope Reed Ferguson over at Grills Mafia does the same. I hope he gets in on that as well.
Oh, man, I love it. Hey, man, thank you for joining me. Folks, find them on the Buffalo Fanatics YouTube. Smoke Break, Mondays at 8. Thanks for joining me, Zach. Go
Ryan,
Bills.
Pleasure's all mine, man. Look forward to doing it again. And yeah, for sure, go Bills, baby. Talk soon.
Talk soon. Take care, buddy. That was ZBot, Zach from the Buffalo Fanatics. Always enjoy having him on the show. There was a lot to discuss on today's show in regards to the Buffalo Bills offseason. This offseason has been unlike any other. I did not anticipate that this Buffalo Bills offseason would be as impactful as it was. Did I think that the Buffalo Bills would go out and get a Von Miller? No, that never even crossed my mind. That thought never even crossed my mind. I'm somebody that I like to stay as informed as possible, as informed as humanly possible. And whether it's the news beat in sports, whether it's just, brush on my information to formulate my opinions that I record and put out to you guys, the listeners and viewers, I like to do that too. But the news of Von Miller coming to Buffalo was never even on my radar. Like, this wasn't something that was preconceived or previously reported. It just happened. So it's one of the few circumstances, the few opportunities where I can get genuine news and actually be shocked by it rather than be like, really? Oh yeah, I knew that was happening. So that's it. That's the Thomas Take this week. ZBot of Smoke Break on Buffalo Fanatics. Join me on the show. I'll have another guest next week. Onward and upward as we inch closer and closer. You heard Zach, 71 days away from NFL football season. I'm Ryan Thomas. Go Bills.